And you've got these big, huge cycles on the scale of like the precession of the equinoxes. That's like 30,000 years, not quite, but of the earth and how it tilts and all that stuff. And you come down, you've got like the cycle of a life, right? And then you've got the cycle of like fertility and menopause in women and menopause in men, right? Then
I
you've
always
got,
forget about that, don't they? Men do go through, it's actually called andropause, and they go through that as well.
Yeah, andropause, exactly. So you've got those cycles all the way down to the moon cycles and the menstrual cycles, all the way down further to circadian rhythms and diurnal cycles. And then you've got even smaller cycles, think sleep cycles. These are called ultradian rhythms, which are much smaller, like 90 to 120 minutes generally. We have like 4 or 5 of these a night, ideally. So flow states work the same way, by the way. That's why I bring them up, is because a normal flow state generally is on a like 90 to 120 minute cycle. That's a micro flow state, a smaller flow state. And we can extrapolate that out to, I use an example of like an author writing a piece, and I spend a couple hours and I get into a flow state, and I go through the whole cycle. And then I kind of come out of it, and then I got to recover. That's like a daily thing. And I might have 1, 2, maybe even 3 of those in a day. That'd be awesome, right? And then you've got a bigger cycle of like, say you're writing a whole book, where maybe the first couple months is a struggle phase because you're gathering research, you're doing interviews, you're doing all of this reading of all these things. And it's frustrating. You're trying to figure things out. And then you finally kind of get into that flow. And then, months 3 through 7 of writing this book are just like magic, right? So you can go through on a macro scale a flow state as well. But the point of it is that we need to be aware of those cycles, especially in like the corporate world and outside of sports, because it's built into sports a lot of times because we got seasons. But we don't really have that in the business world for corporate athletes or cognitive athletes. But we really need that. We need to go through cycles of work and then release and recover, right? So there is a framework that I actually like that's as old as time. And it's called hedonic engineering. And it's really built around kind of these different ways that we can use ecstatic states or different consciousness kind of shifting or nervous system shifting techniques to kind of do this nervous system reset or recover. And the traditional way that it's used is like every week we do a kind of a big reset. Think like a religious, like the Sabbath in Judaism, or you go to church on Sunday, and Sunday is kind of meant for that.
Yeah.
Right? Or if you're not a religious person, you just have a day where you take a day each week and you just relax and you just do your meditation and you just kind of do your sauna and that kind of thing. And then, once a quarter, you have a longer, maybe a 3-day, trip where you go out, and it's all about rest and relaxation and kind of reevaluating things and finishing the cycle, so to speak. And then maybe once a year, you have a longer week or 2 weeks where you go do a silent retreat, or you go do, for some people, maybe it's you go hike to Everest Base Camp. I don't know. But you schedule these things in a cyclical pattern. And if you can use kind of that framework with your business, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're in a corporate setting, C-suite executive or middle manager or blue collar worker, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you can kind of work those in, then you're going to be more refreshed. You're going to maintain a higher level of performance over the long haul instead of trying to push through.
Do you think in today's environment, I guess, it just seems like everything, when I was younger, you didn't have technology in this way. So you had the Sundays were always a day, everything was closed, you couldn't do anything, you were forced into that day of rest. And now with everything constant, 24 hours at you, you've forgotten. And is it time that we need to get back to that state of, like you say, of at least having one point in your cycle, in your week, or whatever it is, where you just have that rest and it's focus on yourself inwardly, or something like that to help reset.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct that it's much harder these days because we have so many distractions that are just vying for our attention all the time. And we're
very
really
quick to take you out of that flow state as well. You could be in a flow state and then you would be distracted.
So actually, this is I'm so glad you said that, Julia, because that goes back to the original other thing that we were talking about. You have this longer term trying to push through, which usually ends in burnout, trying to always push through. But then on a shorter scale, think of just one flow cycle in that struggle phase. Most people don't make it through the struggle phase because They push, 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 but they don't realize that that frustration is actually a good thing. And they need to just let it go to find flow. They need to push a little bit harder and stay in it for just a little bit longer, and they will get the reward of flow states. But what most people do is they go, 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 but it gets hard and that challenge becomes too much. They're not aware of what's on the other side, and so they quit. And what the cardinal rule of flow states in the struggle phase is that you cannot go distract yourself with some other kind of cognitive task or distraction like social media.
Well, I think sometimes, I think sometimes as well, it's that when you're sat, silence with no distraction, it's like almost you can become anxious, you can become fearful because it's uncomfortable sitting with your own thoughts because things can come up, but you kind of have to go through that to come out the other side.
Well, that's a great way to kind of rebalance your dopamine, which is kind of what we're talking about here. The ability to be bored is a lost art, and we could all use a little bit more boredom in our lives and comfort in boredom. And what you're talking about with those racing thoughts and that kind of stuff, that's a thing for sure. In this idea of struggle phase and then flow, there is that place in between called release. And it's really important. Ned Hallowell, I think is his name, is a author. He wrote a book called The Breakout Principle. It's all about this release phase. And it's this tiny spot in between struggle and flow where we have to let go of the problem. What you cannot do is go distract yourself, but you also don't need to just sit in boredom. The best thing you can do is actually get out of your head and into your body. Go for a walk, go sit in a sauna, take a shower, right? Play some music,